Good evening, I'm John Carter, and welcome to Poland Daily. Today, the Central Anti-Corruption Bureau arrested 6 people connected to the Polish armaments group on suspicion of corruption. 2 of the arrested were tied to the ruling Law and Justice Party. Bartłomiej M. served as a spokesperson for the Polish Ministry of Defence until 2017, while Mariusz Antoni K. was an MP who sat on the Parliamentary National Defence Committee. The experts we spoke to say that the arrests show that the Central Anti-Corruption Bureau treats everybody in the same way, regardless of their political affiliations.
The investigation concerns mismanagement based on influences and faking documents from the company PGZ SA. The officers of the Central Anti-Corruption Bureau detained 6 people regarding an investigation concerning the poor administration of assets in the Polish armaments group and directly causing substantial material loss. Among the arrested is the former head of the political cabinet Bartłomiej M., former board member of the PGZ Radosław O., former parliamentarian Mariusz Antoni K., and 3 employees of the Ministry of National Defence and PGZ. The spokesman of the Law and Justice Party, Beata Mazurek, took the floor.
Chairman Jarosław Kaczyński said multiple times that there will be no holy cows. Everyone is equal before the law, regardless of their badges or political affiliations. This is the difference between the ruling standards of the Law and Justice Party and Civic Platform. We are credible.
The case concerns the period when Antoni Macierewicz was the Minister of National Defense. President Andrzej Duda's spokesman, Błażej Spychalski, when asked in the Onet Rano program about the arrest of Bartłomiej M., stated that this is a huge problem for the former Minister of National Defense. He emphasized that he is not surprised by the arrest. There are different stories being published by various people saying that the Law and Justice Party's role is not efficient, does not fight crime, and most importantly, does not check up on their own. What happened here fundamentally contradicts that. The Polish state works just fine. The Ministry of National Defense and the PGZ SA company declared their full cooperation with the law enforcement authorities in conjunction with the investigation carried out by the Central Anti-Corruption Bureau.
The British House of Commons will cast the deciding vote concerning the Brexit deal tomorrow. On the 15th of January, Parliament strongly rejected the initial version of the deal negotiated by Theresa May's government.
The British Parliament must adopt an agreement by February 26th. Postponement of Brexit is becoming a likely scenario, as it could prevent the United Kingdom from leaving the European Union altogether.
Well, certainly, I think the amendment talks about 9 months. I think that's way too long. I'd like to see an extension of Article 50 maybe for about 3 months, if indeed proper negotiations are going to take place.
Labour Party's Yvette Cooper proposed an amendment which would extend the deadline of the EU agreement.
The reason that we're in this situation is because we've had continued delays from the Prime Minister, continually kicking the can down the road. And the problem is we're still not really seeing any progress. So I hope that this does put pressure on the Prime Minister to sort things out by the end of February. But if we get to that point, she should be ruling out no deal. She should be recognising that she cannot put families across the country into a situation where there are tariffs on food, so food prices go up, where there are delays to medicines so that people worry.
British Prime Minister Theresa May conducted consultations with the oppositions regarding some controversial provisions included in her Brexit deal. However, leader of the Labour Party Jeremy Corbyn declined the invitation, saying he will not negotiate until the Prime Minister rules out the possibility of leaving the European Union without a deal.
I think a no deal can be avoided. It can be avoided. Certainly a no deal exit at the end of March can be avoided. It can be avoided by one of 2 mechanisms, either a deal being ratified by the House of Commons and, of course, the European Parliament. Let's not forget the European Parliament has to ratify this too. It's not just Westminster. Or alternatively, obviously the option is there if the UK wishes to seek an extension of Article 50.
The Irish Prime Minister announced that in case Great Britain were to leave the European Union without a deal, military may return to the Irish border.
Ireland, the UK and the European Union would have to sit down again. We'd have to come up with an agreement that avoids a hard border. The only way to avoid a hard border is through alignment on customs and through alignment on regulations. It's the only way. So we'd probably end up after a difficult period of I don't like to say chaos, but certainly after a difficult period of no deal, with some sort of agreement that is very close to what has just been rejected by the House of Commons. So doesn't it make sense now to actually ratify the agreement that took 18 months to negotiate? It was a difficult compromise. It's not perfect. There are lots of elements to it that everyone doesn't like, but there is a reason why we got there.
The Brexit clock is ticking. Politicians in Great Britain have less and less time to break this political impasse. According to the plan, the United Kingdom is set to formally leave the European Union on March 29th.
Today, the former Minister of Finance, Jacek Rostowski, testified in front of the Parliamentary Investigation Committee again. Just like during the first hearing, he avoided answering detailed questions concerning mechanisms which led to a huge VAT hole in the state budget of about 250 billion zloty between the years 2007 and 2015.
To już drugie przesłuchanie byłego ministra finansów Jacka Rostowskiego.
This is a second hearing of the former Minister of Finance Jacek Rostowski in front of the Parliamentary Investigation Committee. He was asked, among others, about deliberations in the Chancellery of the Prime Minister of Poland. Both Elżbieta Hojna-Duch and the former social advisor of Jacek Rostowski, Renata Hajder, testified that Sławomir Nowak was involved in the discussions concerning tax solutions. Today, Minister Rostowski denied Nowak's influence and competences of the scope of the Ministry of Finance. He also said that no important decisions were made during earlier mentioned discussions. Asked why Hajder was appointed to the function of social advisor by word of mouth, he answered that there wasn't a need for her to be appointed officially because the function was informal. The head of the committee, Marcin Horała, has a different opinion. He said that the lack of a written agreement can erase the footprints. He also informed that the leader of the civic platform, Grzegorz Schetyna, recommended the vice heads of the Ministry of Finance.
Panie przewodniczący, ja naprawdę muszę zaprotestować.
I have to protest when it comes to this chart. This is unacceptable. You're not letting me have free speech, and you have one in the form of this chart. I think that this is inappropriate. The committee is an instrument of propaganda of the Law and Justice Party. Thank you so much for admitting this. I was very tolerant previously. I even found it funny that you publicly create good images for TVP.
Stosowne już poza tym, że
różnica w pozycji pomiędzy tak grubymi nićmi szyte, że
This is being carefully orchestrated. I have to say that the distortion of the words from the hearing is very sad. Clearly, there have been a few examples of that. The former minister claims he doesn't know about the detailed information concerning different holes, and this was the duty of a different minister. It is very important when it comes to reversed VAT tax, because in this case, Minister Grabowski, who was earlier asked about it, didn't know either.
As he had done previously, Jacek Rostowski wanted to open the hearing with his own speech. As we remember, it took a lot of time. That's why the head of the committee started with questions and left speeches to the end of the hearing, which Rostowski didn't like. The former Minister of Justice will testify tomorrow.
A new standoff between the Italian government and an NGO vessel with migrants on board is taking place in the Mediterranean Sea. The German NGO Sea-Watch 3 picked up 50 migrants off the Libyan coast on Saturday and is now anchored off the coast of Sicily, demanding that Italy allows the migrants to disembark. Italian Minister of Interior, Matteo Salvini, continues to refuse to give up his tough stance on migration, despite the threat of prosecution by Sicilian judges.
Italy has allowed the ship to lay anchors closer to Sicily to avoid rough waters, but on the orders of the Italian Minister of Interior, Matteo Salvini, the Sea-Watch 3 are not allowed to dock in Sicily. Some of the migrants on board say that they feel as if they have been tricked into setting out on the journey to Europe.
We are not terrorists. What we see at home, in the papers and on television is a Europe where we thought if we risked our lives, we could also make it to Europe. But the contrary is true.
The volunteers on board of the NGO vessel argue that the migrants must be allowed to disembark in Italy because of the sanitary conditions on board.
Sanitary conditions on board are not made for people to stay here for an extended period of time. Our medical attention is focused on serious cases. We are unable to give psychological help even though a lot of these people are suffering from post-traumatic symptoms.
Matteo Salvini recently received the news that he will be prosecuted in Sicily for not letting more than 100 migrants disembark in Sicily during a similar standoff late last year.
It is true, we are not on a satirical program or in a fake newspaper. We are in Italy and I have been accused of aggravated kidnapping. Me, I am wanted. I risk between 3 and 15 years in jail because they claim that I, as Interior Minister, have abused my powers.
Despite the threat of prosecution, Salvini states that he won't budge on immigration policy.
Lasciamo che l'immigrazione sia gestita dall'ONU.
So we could let migration be managed by United Nations and by NGOs, or you can replace me with a human trafficker so he can do my job and organize his trade without kidnapping anyone. You go, you come, food, accommodation, pension, hotel, whatever you want. We won't have that. Decisions on migration, anti-terrorism and security policies are up to the government, not a private Dutch organizations.
Se si ha il permesso di arrivare, questo vale anche per
More than 700,000 migrants have arrived in Italy by boat from Africa since 2014, but the number has fallen drastically in the last year. Liberal forces within the country want Salvini to open up the ports to NGO vessels, but that seems unlikely to happen anytime soon.
Thank you very much for joining me here this evening at Poland Daily. I'm John Carter. Stay tuned after the break for Poland Daily Weather, followed by Poland Daily Business, and that'll be followed by the culture, travel and the history.
Welcome to Poland Daily Weather. Overnight lows will be from -1 degree in Białystok and up to 2 degrees in the southeast parts of the country. Tonight we are expecting quite a bit of snow in the whole country except the area of Koszalin and Poznań. Tomorrow the temperatures won't be falling below 0 and the warmest will be 2 degrees Celsius. There won't be much sun, it will be rather gloomy, but quite a bit of snow as well as rain will appear. The area of Poznań should remain dry. Now let's move on to the next 3 days. Wednesday will be nice and sunny with snow in the northeast part of Poland. Thursday, though, will bring us snow with rain all over the country. On Friday, the temperatures will rise up and it will be up to 4 degrees Celsius. This is all for tonight. Thank you and have a good evening.
Poland Daily Business Edition. Tonight our guest is Michał Kubicki of Association Against Unfair Banking Practices or Stop Bankowemu Bezprawiu. Po polsku, welcome sir to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And we are talking since a few episodes about something that happened in Poland in 2008 and later on. That means a catastrophe for millions of people who took credits denominated in foreign accounts. We already learned about the practices, how it worked, what was the idea behind the credit in French francs when you make your living or your livelihood in Polish zlotys. There was no foreign currencies involved in this process, just an exchange mechanism. But we didn't say what profits banks made on that procedure.
Exactly. First of all, we were saying that they were hedging their risk. That's the first thing. So the exchange rate changes, they had not a big influence on those banks. Most of the risk was on the client. So the clients had to pay. The amount that amount of money banking system makes is roughly about 40 billion annually.
Polish zlotys.
Exactly, Polish zlotys.
That's $10 billion
yes,
and some.
Every year. And neither of those banks who offered those complex financial instruments has ever had losses on those transactions. That only confirms that the whole risk was on the clients of those banks. And still people pay back those loans, and they will pay until the end of their days, because, as you said, earlier, loan to value now is well over 150%. So people can try to sell the apartment they bought 10 years ago, but they will still have half a loan, original loan to pay back.
Right. So this is clearly unfair. What is the government doing about that? The government of the Civic Platform, the party that's now in opposition and ruled for 8 years from 2007 to 2015, did nothing and said to those credit takers or loan takers, that's your problem. The current government is doing something?
First was President Duda, who during the pre-election campaign promised us as the Swiss franc loan takers to solve the problem. And it started in 2015. So there were a couple of bill proposals prepared by the president, by the Law and Order Party, by Cookies, and also by Platforma, who Wake Up.
Cookies is the name of another party in Poland, not the Cookie as itself.
Yes. So there were 4 bill proposals prepared, and today, currently, we have proceedings over President Duda bill proposal.
Right, but the Law and Justice also introduced a mechanism that allows the credit takers to get to the court with the bank. And as far as I'm aware, most of the cases were solved in benefit of those loan takers who were not aware of the complex financial nature of the simple mortgage.
Yes, the people decided that they cannot wait any longer. 10 years is much time. In most of the cases, 1/3 of the whole loan life. So they decided to go to the courts to solve this problem. And there are already over 3,000 cases in the Polish courts where Swiss loan takers fight with the banks. There are also a couple...
Courts are in favor of calculating all this in Polish zlotys, and they say you didn't get Swiss francs at any point of this, you didn't pay back Swiss francs at any point of the procedure, and the bank didn't get any Swiss francs. So you should pay your due in Polish zlotys, and that's it, with the profits and margins and all possible things.
Exactly. The basis of the court's ruling is that we, as the clients, we had no idea what is the amount of the loan, because we were signing a loan denominated in Swiss francs, but we were sold Swiss francs in exchange for Polish zloty based on the table prepared by the bank. And this table could be whatever they wanted. And this is way against all the laws, especially European laws and the civil code in Poland.
Right. So the situation looks solved. Like we have the procedures. There is, as you said, 3,000 cases in bank. The case is solved case by case. So there is no general agreement. So this way, our government sort of backed from the confrontation with the banking system, but still had the issue solved.
Well, as I said, today we have about 3,000 court cases out of 420,000 open loans, which is even less than 1%. So the problem will not be solved in that manner. First of all, people are afraid of going to court because they were already treated by the, very powerful institutions like banks.
With the bank. Mm-hmm.
Of course, the power is on the bank side, so people are afraid of this. Secondly, of course, the cost of going to the court is relatively high. If you had a loan of, let's say, 100,000 zloty, your case procedures can cost you up to, say, 30,000. That's much for those people. and majority of them thinks, well, we have to think whether it makes sense, financially speaking, to go to court. So the problem will be solved only by those who have enough financial resources to fight with the banks. So this is not actually the way, and this is not the way we as an association expect.
So you still demand the authorities in the country and the lawmakers to take action?
Yes, because otherwise the majority people of the people...
What sort of action they should take to satisfy your demands?
Well, today or the last week's action was the bill proposed by President Duda, which creates a fund to help people who cannot pay the installments. This is actually not the way, because in the form that we have today, the fund that was created had only less than 1,000 submissions. So out of 420,000 open loans today, the submission to take the loan from the fund was less than 1,000. And we can see that there is a problem. Whatever we create there will not solve the problem. The problem is, I think, in the structure of the responsibility. The banks have to take responsibility for what they did around 2008, and they have to admit that they were not giving out Swiss francs. They were having complex financial instruments, and propose something that makes those loans payable, let's say this way. So if I took 100,000 10 years ago, I cannot pay 120,000 today because I already paid 50,000 out of it. So it's obviously doesn't make any sense. So the lawmakers' proposals that also are on the table are dealing with the conversion of the loans from Swiss francs and euro to Polish zlotys. The problem is how they should be converted, because some lawmakers say we should do it at the exchange rate of 2008 where they were given. Fair enough. Or others say banks have to propose something, and they have a certain amount on that fund to use for those conversions. But it won't work.
Discussion is still ongoing. We will see how it ends. But I hope our viewers already know that the problem exists here, and this is a serious issue to be dealt with, because we are speaking about billions of Polish zlotys that can of credits that can suddenly be payable, and this can severely damage the whole financial system here in Poland.
Exactly.
Not to mention the lives of the millions of people.
And we have to expect that finally the interest rates in Switzerland will go up, and in the nearest future Swiss franc can go up also, and that will be a disaster.
So thank you very much for coming to the show. We'll talk about more issues of Polish economy in the next Poland Daily Business. Right now, sir, thank you very much. Michał Kubicki of the Association Against Unfair Bank Practices was our guest, sir.
Thank you very much.
And that was it for tonight's Poland Daily Business.
Welcome again to Poland Daily Weather. Tomorrow in Poland, the area of Wrocław, Szczecin and Kraków will be sunny. The maximum temperature will be 2 degrees Celsius. Warsaw will see 1 degree mixed with snow and rain, and Łódź will see 0 degrees. In Europe tomorrow, up to 17 degrees in the Iberian Peninsula, but the north of Europe will be quite a bit cooler as usual. -8 degrees in Oslo, and Norway will see only -4. The most sunny place tomorrow will be Rome, but despite the cooler weather, Central Europe will also be nice and sunny. This is all. Thank you. Good night. Welcome to Poland Daily Culture. In today's episode, we will discover the most fascinating stories about the interwar period in Poland. Stay with us. Hello, Artur. Thank you for joining us again. Maybe one person you could describe and mention who was the iconic person of those times, the most famous. Who would come to your mind at first?
Well, it's so nice for having these questions asked, because I think that in every single country, inhabitants of this country or historians or just people like you and me like to say, oh, these were the days. Maybe inhabitants of Portugal or Spain are so proud of the moments when they were discovering the world among French and Dutch and English and Germans. There were moments in Mongolian history when they were possessing half of Asia. Macedonia have their amazing moments, 3 centuries BC, amazing mythology of Greece, of ancient Roman Empire. Every single country, every kind of history has some kind of resentment to some moments. And I bet that in your family and your friends and our friends from all over the world, we do like to commemorate these moments of Polish history in between World War I and World War II. When we say these were the days, then we like to refer to this period of time when Poland once upon a time was back on the track, when Polish culture was widely known, when everyone was saying, yes, finally they are back on the map. People were following ideas of Jan Ignacy Paderewski, of Madame Curie Maria Skłodowska, and so many Polish poem writers of that period of time. And finally, Poland is once again there. And even though these were only 21 years of Polish history, then so many things happened in that period of time. And once again, thank you very much for having this possibility together to talk over these things.
Thank you so much for providing us with this wonderful and interesting information. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Everyday life during the Warsaw Uprising was sometimes grey and sad, but even though you could see dust, hatred and death behind the windows, people had something in common that many of us do not know about today. Mutual bond, kindness, cooperation and care. Life and concern for each other. The beginnings did not foretell a catastrophe. In the first days of the fight, the participants of the uprising did not have to worry about the food. People associated with the underground before the W hour began to scrupulously collect food. With a lot of help from suburban manor houses and various private people, they stored bags of coffee, tea, sugar, potatoes, cabbage, melted fat, and other equally basic and necessary articles. Some people may start shuddering at the thought of eating a horse, but the occupation and reality left no space for a sentiment. Initially, the horse was served as a draft animal.
We're here with Marcin KACZOROWSKI, who is a tour guide in the Warsaw Uprising Museum, and so this is what we will discuss today. My first question is about food during those hard times where there wasn't much to offer. What were people eating, and how were they providing their food for their families, for themselves?
Hello everybody, good to be here with you. First of all, we have to remember that Warsaw was surrounded from the first day of the uprising. There are about 5,000 troops surrounding the city to make sure that no partisans smuggle food inside the capital. So the hunger started very early on, and people started eating whatever was available, namely cows, horses, of course, even dogs, even pigeons that were fed special grains soaked with alcohol so that it would be easier to catch them, and in extreme cases, even rats. However, there were special propaganda posters which would encourage people to spare some milk for children. So that's why some cows survived. And even, well, I had it from the horse's mouth, from one insurgent, one liaison officer. She told me about cows running up and down the staircases in Warsaw. So it was quite amazing because there were insurgent units that would keep the cows for the special purpose of feeding children in the city center. Basically, the city center's supplies were the worst because they didn't have access to allotments. So you couldn't get any fresh vegetables. So that was the primary issue. There was some, for example, barley, which was provided by the brewery of Haberbusch and Schiele. And well, it's related to the story of legendary spit soup, because you would cook the barley, but still would have to spit out the pieces of it, even if when it was well prepared, and you would eat a spoon and then spit a little. So, well, therefore, we talked about the spit soup. Sugar was available in other districts. So we hear from many surgeons that they, for many, many days or even weeks, they would eat sugar. So, well, it's when we imagine going to battle after you were fed mostly with sugar, many days, well, we can imagine how undernourished those people were. Yes.
And in the areas of the city centers and bigger cities, was it different how people ate than in the other parts of the towns? Well,
the insurgents could recall, for example, very good food supplies in Milanówek, so they were amazed.
Why there?
Because the Milanówek wasn't surrounded, so there was no siege. That's why they, in comparison with Warsaw, their food supplies were pretty good.
Tell us something about what people were wearing in those times.
Well, there were two different kinds of units in the first place. They were kind of professional conspirators, and they were better prepared, better armed from the very beginning. They were sometimes paid to be in the underground, and there were units forming spontaneously. So it also had some impact on what they were wearing. The most legendary unit was Radosław unit, so the legendary Sophie, Zośka, and umbrella parasol units frequently wore German Waffen-SS uniforms, which were taken from a German storehouse. So practically, it was very difficult to distinguish between Polish fighters and Waffen-SS fighters, to the extent that the German command, seeing that so many insurgents were wearing Waffen-SS uniforms, gave a specific order not to wear those Waffen-SS uniforms and not to wear German helmets, which were also worn by the insurgents. There were many mistakes, so Germans would shoot their own people. Sometimes the insurgents would think that the SS unit, which stationed nearby, was an insurgent unit. So you hear lots of such stories.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Pleasure to meet you.
You too. Thank you for joining us today on Poland Daily Culture, and see you tomorrow.
Ladies and gentlemen, today on Poland Daily History, we will explore in depth the history of the szabla, or the Polish saber. This is the weapon that is immortalized by the Polish wing hussars that spread fear throughout European history, and it was used to save Christianity in the famous Battle of Vienna. Today, we will talk to the expert, Marcin Bąk, an instructor of fencing and historical fencing. And later on in the program, he will teach us a few moves. Back in the medieval era, the Polish kids are familiarized with the art of fencing from a very young age. And I was wondering if you can elaborate on how they get used to fencing, how they learn the techniques and such.
Tak naprawdę wiek, w którym młody
Young Polish noblemen would begin their fencing training when they were around 7 years old. It was at this age that boys from the nobility would leave the care of their mothers and enter the path leading them to becoming men. Fencing training was mainly meant for the aristocracy, but also for lower classes noblemen, richer farmers, and for members of the middle class living in the cities. All of them had to know how to fight. Apart from fencing, they also learned how to swim and, first and foremost, how to ride a horse. A couple of hundred years ago, practically everyone in Poland knew how to ride a horse. You could say that only the disabled and newborns didn't have that skill.
Czyli walka wręcz bez broni, po polsku kiedyś nazywano chodzenie za pasy.
What is more, Polish noblemen also trained in wrestling or fist fighting. Apart from traditional fencing, they were also taught how to fight with different types of weapons, such as the spear, warhammer, or nadziak in Polish, with a dagger and a bow. However, the most famous and weapon of choice for Poles would be the saber. For this type of training, fencing teachers used a saber like this. The so-called palcat was a wooden saber with a metal handle, which allowed for safe fencing practice.
To jest współczesny palcat. On ma rękojeść wykonaną z metalu, osłonę rękojeści wykonaną z metalu.
Sometimes the handle, which also protected the wielder's hand, was made out of hardened leather or wicker. The most basic version of this type of training weapon didn't even have a handle like this, but was simply a piece of carved wood, more or less the length of a saber.
Wycięty z drzewa, bez żadnych sęków, bez żadnych zacięć.
With this, a 7-year-old Polish nobleman would train at least an hour a day. Of course, training was still quite dangerous, since fencing masks were not yet known back in those days.
Ta nauka była dosyć niebezpieczna, dlatego że nie znano i nie używano w ogóle masek szermierczych.
So is there any names during the time that are very wide known? Like if you were a nobleman back in the time, you have a little bit of money in your hands and you want to make sure that your children get the best training in terms of fencing, who would you go to?
Tak, oczywiście byli tacy mistrzowie. Właściwie w każdej wsi, w każdym majątku ziemskim.
There were many masters of the art of fencing. Every village and estate had at least one fencing master who was not only thought to be a great swordsman, but also a good teacher. In poor villages, this role would most often be played by some famous local warrior, but the magnates, barons, and other noblemen would often hire professional fencing teachers to train their sons.
Nauczycieli, którzy uchodzili za dobrych wojowników i dobrych nauczycieli, płacili im pieniądze za nauczanie swoich synów.
The Polish royal family also hired fencing masters who taught the young princes and members of the royal family Western techniques, so not only fighting with a saber, but also with a prickly weapon, in other words, a rapier or an épée. Polish fencing was very unique, since it combined both Western and Eastern techniques.
I z zachodu. I polska szlachta, polscy wojownicy mogli porównać system walki azjatycki, wschodni, z tym systemem zachodnim.
Polish fencers took the best out of these two styles and made it into their own. One of the most famous Polish fencing masters was King Jan Sobieski III, who had very good teachers in both saber and rapier fighting. Not a lot of people know this, but during his travels across Western Europe, Sobieski was even a musketeer, serving in the court of the French king for a year. He served in the French king's Guard of Honor, which may be difficult to imagine. A Polish nobleman without his saber and traditional outfit, wearing the robes of a musketeer and with a rapier by his side.
Szabli, bez kontusza, tylko w stroju takim muszkieterskim z rapierem przy boku. Dobrze, Ben, trochę porozmawialiśmy o tym, jak to było z szablami kiedyś.
We have already talked a bit about the history of fencing, but now I will show you how it was actually done.
Pokażę ci, jak kiedyś tym władano.
Please assume the fencing stance, and now you will try to attack with a cut using the French mill maneuver and try to land it on my helmet. I will stand right next to you and show you how it's done. We will do it using the inner French mill, so first you let the tip of your weapon drop, and then...
Hop! Do przodu, tak jest. Staraj się.
Try not to move your torso while doing it. Just keep it upright and let your arm do the work. There you go. And keep your feet still too. Just your arm.
Tylko hop. Hop. Dobrze, jeszcze raz. Tak. I luźna ręka.
And now try to hit my helmet.
Spróbuj to zrobić teraz, trafiając w moją maskę. Ben, pozycja.
Assume the position and then try to hit me on my helmet.
W moją głowę. Hop. No, wal. Młyniec i w głowę. Mocniej.
Harder, that's what the helmet is for. Not bad, but try not to lean forward with your torso. Just use your arm. None of these movements.
Nieźle.
Okay, good. Just watch out for these movements. And now we will do the same, but using the outer French mill.
Tego nie robimy.
Good. Loosely with the wrist.
Bywa i tak, tak?
Well, you've got to watch out for that. Therefore, apart from swinging the weapon, your footwork is also very important, because your attacks will be useless if your opponent evades them.
Drugie cięcie, jakie ci
The second move I will show you is a cut directed to your opponent's torso, and here you will move like this and strike sideways, like this.
W ten sposób. Tak i tak. O właśnie, tutaj. I tu.
You are supposed to cut me here, but while doing you need to keep your arm straight.
Tak, trafiamy.
Now bend your arm just a little bit.
Do a small relax.
Not all the way like this. Go ahead, give it a try.
Hop.
And now try to strike while I'm parrying.
Really? Slowly. Hop. Yes. Hop. Yes. Hop. Yes. Hop. Yes. Hop.
There you go. And now we will try a different exercise. If you see that the tip of my sword is kept low, then you use a French mill to strike me on the helmet. If you see me keeping my sword by my side, then you try to cut me in the torso. Just make sure that you don't lean in.
Good. Good.
Okay, and that's it. We are done for today.
Today we have explored the history and the usage of the Polish szabla that is iconic to Poland history and have been with Poland throughout years of war. And that's it for today. I'll see you next time on Poland Daily.
Welcome to Poland Daily Travel, where once again we head around Warsaw behind the scenes. We'll be traversing the hidden byways of today to remember the events of yesterday. In the next few episodes, we'll go deep into history to discover moments of past terror and present redemption as we look at some of Warsaw's most harrowing moments. Memories of the Warsaw Ghetto of World War II, when the Nazi occupation made killing zones out of once thriving neighborhoods. For more so than any other city in Europe, Warsaw has seen and felt the 20th century's events at their worst and at their best. From the depths of World War II to the heights of the Solidarity movement, Warsaw has witnessed hideous destruction and glorious rebirth. One might say, in fact, there's no other city like it in the world, and in that sense, this metropolis remains the most human of places, given to fits and starts of soul-crushing violence in its past, along with moments of sheer exuberance as it stretches its vital limbs into the future, into the 21st century. So yeah, the thing that I find so amazing is that in the last days of the Jewish ghetto, up until the last week, there were diaries, journals that appeared that talk about people having dances and girls putting on makeup, the men in their best dresses, the men dressing up with a tie and a coat, and carrying on with this normal life, even in extreme circumstances. Yeah? Yes. Had you heard of that before? Did you know about
Absolutely.
that?
I know about
because
that.
Not a lot of people know that.
One of the most difficult things to imagine.
Yeah.
And then you understand why those old ladies that have suffered so much in World War II always put up their makeup until the very last day of them, you know, even 80 years later. They really care about themselves because they enjoy every single minute of their life.
Enjoy every day. And be ready for those days. It's a great lesson in this day and age when we complain so much about all the
nothing.
We're surrounded by miracles. Absolute miracles, including the Żuk, of course.
Well, and all other technology that we
all the technology
that we love so much.
These things that we have, these phones and whatever.
But look at that. This monument.
Yeah,
is
what is this all
different.
about? Because it's
about this dignity, you know. It's about this personality of people. It's exactly. It's similar to what we were talking a minute ago. Yes, it is putting a name to every person that we can put a name to. Here you have a long list of names and pseudonyms. Sometimes
names
only
and
the
pseudonyms,
yeah. Pseudonyms, yeah.
Yeah, adopted names, yes.
Adopted names, yes.
By soldiers or combatants, or
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
By people who are inside this area here, who are victims of here, and for us it is important to remember them in person. For them we have some pictures. We know how they look like. For other people, we have only the remembrance of their comrades who are with us even today. But now, in these days, they are dying. So by the moment you display this or you watch this on YouTube, some more might have gone. Yes, it happens every day.
These people are dying away, and soon there will be no survivors of either the Jewish Ghetto Uprising or the Warsaw Uprising.
And we take it as a symbol, you know, we take this stone as a symbol because we know that there were several hundred hideouts like that which have been taken over by Germans, sometimes after very fierce fighting in here.
Yeah.
All these inscriptions are in English and in Polish and in Hebrew for everybody who's really interested to look at.
Let me read what this says here. It says, grave, this area, grave of the fighters of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, built from the rubble of Miła Street. That's the street we're on. One of the liveliest streets of pre-war Jewish Warsaw. These ruins of the bunker at 18 Miła Street are the place of rest. The place of rest of the commanders and fighters of the Jewish Combat Organization, as well as some civilians. Among them lies Mordecai Aniewicz, the commander-in-chief. On May 8th, 1943, surrounded by the Nazis, after 3 weeks of struggle, many perished or took their own lives, as you described before, refusing to die at the hands of their enemies. There were several hundred bunkers built in the ghetto, which were found and destroyed by the Nazis. They became graves. They could not save those who fought refuge inside of them, who sought refuge inside of them. Yet they remained everlasting symbols of the Warsaw Jews and their will to live. The bunker at Miła Street was the largest in the ghetto. It is a place of rest of over 100 fighters, only some of whom, as you just said, are known by name. Here they rest, buried where they fell, to remind us that the whole earth is their grave.
Yeah, they simply have been us, you know, of only a couple of years ago. It's not even a lifespan of a person that divides us from these moments.
Hi, you're back with Poland Daily Travel, and we are standing in Maranów. We've moved on, and we are in quite a surprising place. The architecture here has secrets to tell us, and what are they, Wojtek?
Well, this is surprisingly architecture from 1950s.
Okay.
It's a time in which, you know, this country was just being built up again. It was same time in a civil war and same time in an extreme progress. And this progress can be best seen here.
Because there was nothing here, then suddenly you have this.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, it looks like a big palace or something, doesn't it?
This word palace is a very good one to use here.
It is, okay.
It is.
I'm glad I got it right.
Why? The whole name of the whole district is coming from a palace that was once here, a little bit more north of this place. Once upon a time, in the 17th century, that's like 1680s, a quite famous Polish-Italian guy who spent most of his life in Poland, Mr. Joseph Bellotti, has made a palace in here.
Right here.
A little bit more north of here.
Okay, but this was like this Palace, wasn't it? Or?
It was not called Bellotti Palace, it was called Muranów or Murano
I think
Palace.
we're going to see where that palace used to be next, right?
Well, that will be a problem, because right in the place in which the palace was, there is now a gigantic office building.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it's the Intraco building.
Okay.
We don't see it anymore.
Yeah.
But what we know from why it was called Murano, yes? It's like the small island ahead of Venice.
Yeah, because it seems like an Italian name. Yeah.
Because the guy who was an Italian guy, was born in that small island, and he didn't like this fact very much, so he named a part of today's Warsaw like
After
that.
an Italian island
After
Murano.
After the island he got born at. So that's, you know.
So he was born on Murano Island, and Maranów is the district where we are right now, which is just north of Śródmieście, or centrum of Warsaw, right?
A little bit more north of Śródmieście and a little bit more west of Stare Miasto.
Okay.
That's exactly here.
Okay.
And
the Stare Miasto would be out there.
Out there, yeah.
Yeah.
So it is quite understandable why people have made these homes here look like a palace, yes? Especially from the front. We will go with our cameras to see the great columns, to see the great entrances towards here, and even this courtyard is just great.